works with religious or biblical references, which I'm sure you all took great soccer. I will adopt just a slightly different approach so that you can have variety. As lawyers stand to speak, you get a perspective that is rounded. I'm going to speak about my own personal journey very briefly, because I think from there you would see my challenges and also whatever successes I recorded. I started in St. Gregory's College in 1973, and the first thing that occurred to me that made me realize that law was a particular line I was going to pursue was I was asked by my English teacher, the whole class, to summarize one man, one machete. And we all wrote it. And when she read my script, she accused me of cheating. She said, "You must have cheated because you have written it identically." And I was taken to the headmaster, and he said it was a very serious offense. So I pleaded in mitigation that allow me to write it again. And I wrote it again, and it was exact. And he looked at me and said, "Well, you may have a photographic memory, and I think you should consider law as a profession." So I went through my secondary school looking at subjects like English, history, religious studies, all the art subjects which required facts, which I could remember, because once I read something, I could see what I read. If I thought about something, I can play it out in my mind without having to look at it. And from there, I went to go and do advanced levels in England for 2 years. When I got there, I suddenly realized I was dealing with a lot of international people who were extremely well read. So I decided to pick up books. I read the biographies of great men. I read literature. I read very widely, and from there I could also see the mistakes of men, the way they analyzed their lives, and the way they saw their future. And I was particularly influenced, and I'm sure some of you who are students may sometimes find extremely talented teachers who remain evergreen in your memory. There was an English teacher, his name was Mr. Jeffries. Now this man could not speak language in an ordinary way. If somebody was chewing chewing gum in class, normally he would shout and say, normally you would expect him to say, "Akinrele, stop chewing chewing gum in my class." But he wouldn't use that expression. He would say, "Akinrele, the perpetual chaffing of your jaw nauseates me." And I'd be fascinated. And the words stayed in my brain. How can someone speak like this? He asked me, I think he was the master in charge of special duties when you do communal services. And my tenure had ended. And instead of him telling me, "Akinrele, your tenure has ended," he said, "Akinrele, I feel compelled to render you exonerate from such a menial task." I was fascinated. So this stuck in my brain. And then when I finished, I did literature, history, and economics for A-levels. And he knew I was going to study law in university. And he said to me, "Remember," and please remember this word, he said, "literature and the law are different. That the law in action produces a special dictionary. That words which are originally in the common coinage of speech acquires a different value in the lawyer's pocket than when in the layman's purse." I mean, look at that beauty of what he said, telling me that I should be careful, that with law you have to be precise. With literature, you can play with words. So I went to university. I went to University College London, and I went to University of Cambridge to do a master's after. Then I came out into the world, and the first thing I had to decide, because from my readings I'd read about late Chief Akintola. He was given the fortunes of 3 lawyers, late Chief Rotimi Williams, late Chief Remifanika San, and late Chief Benson San. There was a prediction as to who was going to succeed in the case. And Akintola, if you remember him, in history, was very clever and very witty. And he said it in Yoruba, for those of you who don't understand Yoruba, I'll translate it. He said, "Chief Williams, Omo statute law." Chief Williams knows statute law. He said, "Remifanika Omo common law." But Benson, Omo Justice, Demola, knew the Chief Justice of the Federation. And philosophically, you have to decide, what kind of lawyer do you want to be? Do you want to be a lawyer who looks at your work and is very thorough with your work? Or do you want a lawyer who has good social connections? Not anything wrong in what he was saying about Chief Benson, but it was more, Chief Benson was a well-connected man and was enjoying his good connections. So philosophically, you had to choose. I went to the firm of Chief Rotimi Williams, probably the most outstanding lawyer in Nigerian legal history, at least certainly in my living memory. And I remember going to court with him, and I would watch how masterfully he would present his case. And in that whole generation, you had about 5 of them who were Titanic lawyers. You had Chief Kehinde Shokola, who was a very strong, moral lawyer who would look at you and tell you you're not properly well dressed, and he was very efficient. You had people like Chief G.O.K. Ajayi, who was very eloquent speak very well and very neat, so you're very attracted to the way he spoke. You see people like Chief Harry Ladner, who would put his hand in his pocket, address the judge very confidently, and what the Supreme Court said to him, because he was so confident, he said, Mr. Ladner, you have proven to us today that it's possible for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. That was the level of determination Ladner had. You had like Chief Ganifayami, who was very passionate, very quick in speaking, very passionate. So you had great lawyers, very dedicated, and as a junior, I would just loiter in court, observe all of them. I didn't say, oh, Chief Williams was my master. I saw 5 or 6 masters, and you pick up the different strengths which they had. And I worked with him for almost 5 years. I was a youth copper when I joined, but I threw myself into the work because I wanted to learn. And when, as Mr. Tiaba said, if you work somewhere and they observe you're industrious, you will get your reward. He threw me into matters. I was able to do appeals, do a lot of things, and then I left after 5 years. Now, when I left, my father had a law firm, Akinrele Co, where he was he practiced when he was active, criminal law and land law. And I left. My brother also worked at Chief Williams for a few years, younger brother. We both decided to go into the firm and resuscitate the firm and start a commercial practice. And when we came out, we suddenly realized, where do we start from? Since we didn't go to university in Nigeria, we had lost the advantage of good connections, which if you had gone to University of Lagos or University of Ife, most of the contemporaries were the company secretaries of banks and financial institutions and insurance companies, and they were the ones giving work out, so we didn't have such a connection. Then I remember a warning my mother gave me in 1977 when I was going to do my A-levels. He said, as you are going, don't you think your father can afford anything in life? Treat anybody you meet as a potential business partner. And she said it then at the age of 16. I said, what is this man talking about? How can I go abroad and be looking at people as a potential business partner? But when we decided to start a new line of business, we now went back to our school friends. We did a list of all those who were in A-level college, all those in university. We came up with about 50 people. We traced on the internet. We worked out where they were, where they worked. We made contact with them, and we go to England. I would start at 5 a.m. in the morning, catch the first tube, have 6 meetings, stay there for 1 week, see all these firms. I come back. My brother went also. He started, saw all the members of different firms. Then we broke the firm into departments: insurance, banking, finance, shipping, oil and gas. We prepared brochures, did it very well, international standard. We didn't know much about the subjects, but we learned enough about it, enough to at least write a profile. And we gave it to these people when we met. It was through that connection we started getting work, and it continued from then, 1986, till now, where we kept on getting multiple referrals from the old connections which we had from school, which sustained us in business. Then the journey of practice. I had very difficult moments and also very good moments. As a lawyer, you're going to be faced with very challenging circumstances. A retired judge gave me a brief to save a relative of his who had been convicted for murder. He gave us the brief. He had been convicted in the High Court, convicted in the Court of Appeal. You know, of course, his execution. We looked through the brief the whole of the weekend. We did find, well, on the first day, we found there was no defense. And I was going to tell him, I think this appeal cannot be sustained, and this man is going to die. But I didn't give up. I sat down with my junior throughout the weekend. They said, let's read this thing line by line, like someone looking through a needle in the haystack. Then we suddenly found that one day when they called the case, the accused person was not present in court. Under the law, in criminal law, an accused is not present in court on any particular day. It's unconstitutional. The proceedings must not go on. You can set aside the trial. I didn't believe it. I said, this must be an error, but let's take the point. We took it in the Supreme Court. I remember Justice Obudari was very, very robust Justice of the Supreme Court. He said, this cannot be true. I want to see the handwritten notes of the judge. There must be a typographical error in the record. We got the handwritten notes 3 days after. It was true. The accused was not in court. I was excited as a lawyer because I was going to get someone off using my skill. But I was very disturbed personally because I felt this was a man who really should go into the gallows. So when the results came, it made me realize that when you hear the expression, the law is an ass, and justice is not necessarily according to all our common notions. Justice is justice according to law. But my own professional rules of conduct require that I defend the man. All I shouldn't do is present anything false. But if I see any form of a defense or a relief that can save him, then I'm duty bound. So it was a mixture. And these are the kind of difficult moments you find in practice. You've acted rightly, you secure the victory of someone, but you know in your heart, this man really did not deserve the victory. Then I was faced with another dilemma, 1996, in a commercial case, where we thought we had the best case, and we were in the Court of Appeal the next day. When I was preparing for the final case, I saw a case that was against my client, and the case was going to destroy the appeal. There was a dilemma. Do I present this case to the court and tell the truth, or do I hold the case? Because nobody had come up with the case. I called the client and I told him. He was very distressed, but I said, I think I'm compelled, I have to tell the court. So I went before the court the next day. They agreed that we had no choice, and I informed the court. The court were stunned, and they said they appreciated my gesture. Immediately after the case, the judge invited me to chambers, and he said he was very moved by the candor, and that he would want to recommend me to become a senior advocate of Nigeria. And I said I hadn't planned it, even though I'd had the idea in my mind. But he said, no, I should go ahead with it. And within 3 years of when he gave me the advice, I became a senior advocate in 1999. And the moral of the story is I lost the appeal, and I lost probably an immediate benefit. But in the long run, honesty is the best policy. I gained recognition. And I think this is very important. Other issues you will face are issues of humility, which Mr. Tiaba mentioned. I was in court one day, Mr. Tibreakers, who I'm sure you all know from politics, was in court, 30 years my senior. And here was I, at the age of 38, a young senior advocate, and I had the right to call my case before him. I knew him from years behind, where he had, in fact, the first time I came back from England, he gave me my first case and asked me a criminal matter to assist him in conducting. And I could not bear the idea that I would call my case before him because I was a senior advocate. So I told the judges, I said, please, Mr. Braithwaite is in court. I want to allow him to exercise his rights of audience. The judge said, are you sure it is your privilege? I said, yes, but I wish to waive my privilege. And that was very important, because you must always remember in everything you do, you are not there on your own accord, and you must always have regard to people who have given you appreciation and have recognized you. But I've had my mistakes. There was once with late Mr. Kendi Shofola. I sat down in court in the front row, which you're entitled to, and he walked into court, and I was sitting on the edge. I didn't see him initially. He just hit me on the shoulder and did like this, move. And I was so offended by the way he said it. So I refused. And the judges came in and they had to intervene, and then I moved. But what I did was first a reaction to an undignified manner in which he approached me. But in culture, Yoruba culture, it was wrong. I should have deferred. And I went to go and see him after, prostrated on the floor in his office, and apologized. And I always wondered, was it a bit of headiness on my part, or was it just a spur of the moment? I think it was a spur of the moment, because I'm not normally an arrogant person. I just felt assaulted the way he spoke to me, but you must always try to remember to have a balance. Another matter which you have to realize, your case is not your case. You are fighting on behalf of a client. So whatever you feel is a fight between the clients. I remember I was in the Supreme Court once, and my opponent had lost an appeal, which he had won in the High Court and Court of Appeal. I suddenly realized that the judgment that was delivered in chambers, and under Nigerian constitution is unconstitutional. So I took the point in the Supreme Court, and they agreed, and they set aside the judgment of a huge amount of money, and the lawyer was so angry. And normally, when you're in the Supreme Court in Abuja, you don't have a car outside. You have to arrange, either go with someone or pre-arrange a car. So I asked him for a lift to drop me on the street so I could get a taxi, and he just said, no. He was so angry, which was very childish and was very wrong. The right attitude is to shake your opponent when you finish. The matter is not personal. I remember the great story of one of the greatest lawyers in the world, one Mr. Edward Carson. He prosecuted his friend called Mr. Lynch. They both went to Trinity College, Dublin, and Oxford. And he prosecuted him for treason. He was on the other side. Two friends, when I said maybe not friends, but classmates. And when Lynch was in prison on death row, waiting for his execution, they wrote a letter to Mr. Carson. They said, you're my friend from school, and you have played your part in bringing about my present predicament. But that is no reason for bad blood between men of understanding. So when you have understanding, and you know what your respective roles are, then there's no reason to be personal. So those are the kind of issues. But one more area, and that's the area of acknowledging your opponent. I remember in 1995, it was a late Chief Olisa Curole. I had an appeal against him in the Supreme Court, and I think Chief Williams had handled the matter in the Court of Appeal. So I took the matter up in the Supreme Court. And when he didn't see Chief Williams, he just dismissed me. Oh, this young boy, there was no big deal, and he just stood up, told the court, 5 minutes, he sat down. it was a David and Goliath. Because I was younger, I had to work harder. So I prepared, and by the time I finished the appeal had turned in my favor. And Mr. Curole, at the end of it, very elderly, dignified man, called me and said, I can't really come here. And I was at the back. So I walked to the front and said, stop. And he did, and he bowed his head, and I bowed my head back. And I committed myself on that day that I was going to do to junior when I became a senior advocate. Of course, I haven't had the opportunity yet because I've been careful not to take anybody for granted. But I'm sure as I get older, I'm about to take somebody for granted, and I'll have the opportunity of passing on that tradition. It's important. Pass on good traditions. Younger lawyers are going to act better than you. They're quicker. They have more to lose. They're going to be a bit more thorough. You must teach them in practice. Give them that encouragement when the opportunity comes. And then finally, Mr. Chairman mentioned the point. At the end of the day, if you decide to be a lawyer, and a lawyer who wants to practice law, whether you want to go to a company, insurance company, bank, I think the most important thing is you must have some years in experience as a litigator. People come to my office and say, we want to do commercial law. A litigator sees the problem far away. When there's a commercial dispute, because he knows how it's going to end, he can see the problem in advance and advise. If you look at history, the great lawyers, Nelson Mandela was who he was because he was a great advocate as a lawyer. He fought for the oppressed people, so he understood. A good litigator has a moral conscience. He has a vision. He was able to stand before a court, and this is very important when he was on his prison trial, when he announced to the court that he believed in a free South Africa and he was prepared to die for it because it was an ideal that he had lived for. And the judge looked at him. The judge in his notes said that he would have sent Mandela to the gallows, but he was afraid because he didn't expect Mandela to take the position he took. And he was afraid that South Africa would have burned. It was the bravery of the litigator that allowed him. If you look at people like Abraham Lincoln, when he declared slaves free, everybody around him was against it, even his wife. He was a lone voice, but he said, I see a moment in time to do this. And he went ahead and he signed the emancipation. If you read, I think there's a film called Lincoln, I would recommend you watch it. And you see the fight he fought against everybody around him. Again, that was the passion of the litigator. He saw the vision. Now, don't think that law practice doesn't bring dividends. You can be there first 5 years, 6 years, learn the trade, as I said. When you leave, you leverage on the benefit of that knowledge later. If you're good in any profession, you can be a multi-millionaire. You don't have to be into business or into politics within your profession. Abraham Lincoln advised his son when his son wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He said, my son, you want to go into business, be careful. The world of business is full of trickery and deceit. There's nothing better than a man's profession. Stick to it. Be good at it, and you will always surmount all hurdles. The profession is challenging. You have bribery, you have all the issues, but you must just stick to the way you understand things and keep on doing what is right. Whatever is negative never prevails in the long run. And when you look at the balance sheets, if you do things rightly, you'll find you do get recognition and you do get to where you're going. And then finally, remember, like anything in life, you have a lifespan. There's a saying that says between the ages of 20 and 30, or 20 to 40, a man speculates. Come out of university, you're not sure what you want. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You invest in this, you invest in that. You lose this, you lose that. You're young, you're immature, you don't have the experience. So you're going through, so you're speculating. Between 40 and 50, you now begin to accumulate, because at 40, there's a better clarity. Between 50 and 60, you consolidate. You take the gains which you have made between 40 and 50, and you put it together, because you understand what to do, you're not taking any risk. And by 60, basically, you're really in retired mode, and your earning capacity is not the same. So the peak is between 30 and 45, or 30 and 47. And very, very important, if you go to law firms about anywhere in the world, politicians, they're within that age gap. After that, the intellect starts to win, the interest starts to win. So it is what you have used the opportunities at the peak of your career to do that sustains you in the future. So the legal profession has a lot to offer, and I recommend you consider it very seriously, all the points made by my legal friend and I. Thank you very much.